right. I'd just like to start our conversation this morning by asking you at home, and of course, those in the studio here, a very pertinent question. And that will be, what could make someone snuff the life out of a fellow human being? Kinsley.
Well, in general, nothing actually justifies such an action. And even if anyone nurses such intent of taking the life of a fellow human being, the fear of the consequences as enshrined in the law ought to be a deterrence. More so, respect for the sanctity of human life demands utmost restraint, even at the peak of provocation.
Precisely. Now, these days, respect for human lives seem to be eroding our society, leading to increased wanton killings across Nigeria, not just Nigeria, across the world, with no recourse to the law of the land. Now, the bloody headlines that abound in the media nowadays are gradually eroding good conscience. Our society is almost getting used to people being killed for nothing, almost on daily basis.
Now, from the east to the west, southern to the northern parts of our country, Nigeria, the story is the same. Now, the gruesome fashion of these killings is one that begs for answers to the question of what our country is turning into.
Just this month alone, several of these dastardly acts were reported across different parts of the country. From the gruesome killing of the military couple in Imo State by allegedly members of the proscribed indigenous people of Biafra, that's IPOB, to the murder and incineration of Deborah Samuel Yakubu in Sokoto State over charges of blasphemy. And then, of course, we had the mob killing of one David by Okada riders in Lagos, again over an argument of just 100 naira.
And of course, only a couple of days ago, another incident occurred here in the nation's capital, and that is the killing of some 4 persons, coupled with the burning and destruction of property worth several millions of naira in Day. That's a suburb of Abuja. And this followed an automobile accident involving an Okada rider and his passenger.
Now, all these incidents point to the fact that there is an uneasy calm that puts people on edge, such that the slightest provocation and a simple misunderstanding among individuals can ignite violence with ethnic or religious connotations or proportions.
Indeed, Claire, there appears to be growing mistrust amongst the citizenry in some parts of the country. And close watchers and public affairs analysts believe that such mounting mistrust could be doused when justice is seen to be served on persons who perpetrate unlawful acts in society. You know, we're talking about lack of respect for human lives. We can also throw in here the many frequent reports of ritual killing. It looks like there's an industry where human body parts are harvested from victims from north to east to west and south. It's as if life is one a penny.
It's so disheartening. But again, the essence of our program is to look at issues that are fueling, such mistrust among the citizenry. Who are those fanning the embers of ethno-religious intolerance? Or are there people actually doing that? How can we restore respect for sanctity of human life in our society? What is the role of the authorities in all of this? Is it within their mandate? Is it within their purview to protect life and property? As we all say, the answers are blowing in the wind. Our guest shall be speaking to these issues and many more on today's episode of Good Morning Nigeria. It's a very serious conversation we're going to be having. I am Claire Adelabu Abdul-Razak. As always, it's our pleasure to have you join us.
All right, and I join my colleague Claire to also welcome you to this edition of the program. My name is Kingsley Osadolo, and Claire, just to underscore the seriousness of today's conversation, if might be misleading to assume that it is something that happens to other people. It's, oh, 4 persons were killed, just a mere number. But those numbers we are referring to, those persons, they had flesh and blood, they had relatives. And usually when these things happen, everyone tends to go about their normal business activities. And the severity of it is that it could be just anybody. And if it is just anybody,
Precisely.
and every other person else will go about their so-called normal business activities. How do we restore sanity in our society? It's Good Morning Nigeria, live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We are broadcasting from our Abuja headquarters studios. We have our complimentary segments. This will include business and newspaper review. For now, here is Dennis Adegunloye, who has the highlights of the morning news. Good morning, Dennis.
Yes, good morning, Kingsley. That's a very important point you just raised at the end of that commentary there. It can happen to anybody, and we must always be on our toes and on our guard, and security is everyone's business. Good morning, Claire, and good morning, Nigerians. President Muhammadu Buhari is in Abu Dhabi, the United Arab Emirates, ahead of a meeting with the new presidents of the country, Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan.
So many things that bring Nigeria and UAE together. At the personal level, when President Buhari came to office in 2015, he instantly struck the same chemistry. He struck friendship with the Prince Mohammed, the then Crown Prince, who has just been elected as president.
The Supreme Court has adjourned hearing on the suit filed by Presidents Muhammadu Buhari and the Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice against the National Assembly to Thursday, May 26, 2022. In the suit, the plaintiffs are challenging the inclusion of Section 84, subsection 12 in the 2022 Electoral Act.
To me, the matter is urgent, and since we are not allowed to reply orally, I had to make a choice.
Premier objection is when you believe this matter could not be filed here, and that is the main reason that what is being done, we believe it should not be here, and as a council, we'll file premier objection.
Its mission accomplished and perennial water problem solved. This is the development in Bauchi metropolis as the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Boss Mustafa, inaugurated the Bauchi Urban Water Expansion Project. The SGF stood in for President Muhammadu Buhari.
Last time water supply infrastructure in the metropolis was upgraded in 1992. I'm happy to note from reports I've received that Bauchi State has executed the project creditably. I'm not surprised at this accomplishment.
Troops of Operation Harinke have rescued 63 kidnapped victims between 28th April and 19th May 2022. The Director Defense Media Operations, Major General Bernard Onyeko, who announced this at a news conference in Abuja, said 54,889 terrorists and their families also surrendered to troops in the northeast.
14th May 2022, a total of 1,627 Boko Haram terrorists and their families surrendered to own troops at different locations within the theater. It comprised of 331 men, 441 women, and 855 children.
And Dakata Dabarao discovered and deactivated 167 illegal refining sites with 156 storage tanks. Meanwhile, more than 40 bandits have been killed in Kaduna State by combined ground security operatives, leading to the destruction of different bandit camps and neutralizing of more than 60 bandits within the first quarter of the year. This is part of the security scorecard presented to the Kaduna State Security Council meeting. The meeting, presided over by Governor Nasiru Ahmed El-Rufai, saluted the security agencies in the state for decimating the bandit camps. President Muhammadu Buhari has congratulated Alhaji Aminu Ado Bayero, the Emir of Kano, on the conferment of the highest honor of the Republic of Senegal, the National Order of Lion. The honor was conferred on him by President Macky Sall at the presidential residence in Dakar in the course of the Emir's visit recently to the country. President Buhari said the honor on the Emir was richly deserved and commended his Senegalese counterparts for spotting the inherent qualities of the traditional head of the most populous northern city. The president said the Senegalese honor award upon the Emir was a recognition for his exceptional services in promoting peace. That concludes the morning news. Good Morning Nigeria continues after this break with Kingsley and Claire.
All right, welcome back. If you've just joined in, you're watching Good Morning Nigeria this Friday, and our topic for conversation much later will be the sanctity of human life. Do we value it? But for now, let's talk business. The federal government is pledging greater attention to the development of MSMEs with the opening of a portal for National MSME Awards. Kunde Adeye will bring us the details.
With the immeasurable contribution of MSMEs to economic growth and development, government has been resolute in its support for the subsector. One of such ways is through the National MSMEs Awards conceived in 2018 to reward excellence, hard work, and innovation in the MSME space, which the Office of the Vice President says is an initiative that has impacted thousands of MSMEs.
The local content must be very high. Because you are not going to take something from outside, come and couple it together and tell us that you are this. We go on serious monitoring and evaluation during the process to see. These things they must be very real because we must see them with our eyes. The categories for this year's awards include the MSME of Excellence in Agriculture, Excellence in Beauty, Wellness, and Cosmetics, in Creative Arts, in Fashion and Style. That was the MSME Awards in Furniture and Woodwork, the MSME Awards in Manufacturing, and lastly, the MSME Awards in Tech Innovation Driven Enterprise.
The portal for applications to be part of the award has been opened for applications and will close on Sunday, 12th of June 2022, where outstanding MSMEs in different categories will receive cars and other prizes at the event to mark this year's World MSMEs Day. With business news, I'm Kunle Adeye.
Thank you very much, Kunle Adeye, for the business package. Coming up next, newspaper review.
Right, let's take a look at the newspaper review now, and Bayo is right here with us. Good morning, Bayo.
Thank you, Claire. Good morning. Good morning, Kingsley. Good morning, Nigeria.
Good to see you. All right, so let's take a look at the front page of the Leadership newspaper this morning. Below the nameplate, that's where you have all the headlines. Magu will face prosecution if indicted by Salami panel. That's according to the federal government. Ganduje frustrated me out of APC. That's according to Shekarau. And he continued politics of Kano. President Muhammadu Buhari inaugurates 23 billion naira water project in Bauchi. Electoral Act. Supreme Court to hear suit on whether appointees must resign to contest. Boko Haram and Saru terrorists now in Kaduna. El Rufai cries out. You have details of that story on page 4, but there are the following riders. Confirms, that's El Rufai now, confirms 360 persons killed in Kaduna in 3 months. 360 persons killed in Kaduna in 3 months. Another 4 students kidnapped in Gidanwaya. Troops rescue 63 civilians, kill 60 criminals as 1,627 terrorists surrender. Victims' families warn against Kaduna train resumption. Quit notice video, Ohaneze warns against unguarded statements. After mayhem, FCT minister shuts day market. Statutory delegates, non-assent to amended electoral act will affect primaries. That's according to House of Reps members. Details on page 8. Claire.
Thank you, Kingsley. Was just going through a very unfortunate incident, and it's just and I'd just like to start with that. The story is just above the nameplate of the Punch. Lagos Airport shut temporarily. Flights diverted over mangled corpse on runway, and the runway is identified as runway 18R of the Lagos Murtala Mohammed International Airport. Just quite unfortunate. I'm sure Bayo will speak to that. Let's look at other stories. FG moves to end ASU strike, begins arrears payment. Now that's good news. I hope it sustains. CBN backs Kumuyi's Southeast Crusade. CAN backs Kumuyi's Southeast Crusade, asks IPELP to embrace peace. Details of that on page 7. Now let's take a look at the lead story. Presidential primaries, uncertainty over APC PDP delegates list as President Buhari delays Electoral Act. Now, the writers to that story, nobody has exact number of delegates for presidential primary. DG Vaughan. APC begs INEC for extension. Oshibaju team, that's VP's team, denies hotel plan for delegates. And other trending stories on the right-hand column, that's your left. We must re-strategize for Nigeria to change, says Obasanjo. It's on page 20. Anambra gunmen, Sean Soludo's 60-day peace offer, continue reign of terror, on page 3. Planned resumption of train service insensitive, says abductees' family. It's on page 9. And other stories, more than 7,000 Nigerian nurses left for UK in 1 year. That's according to report. It's on page 9. And the exact figure, according to this paper, is 7,256. Shekarau's loyalist resigns as Kano commissioner. It's on page 8. Insecurity has moved from northeast to northwest. That's RFI, laments on page 8. Okada ban, police clash with riders. Seize 200 bikes as Lagos vows more raids. You can read that up on pages 4 and 5. And Margot may face prosecution after retirement, according to the minister. Now, there are just 2 stories. Okay, I think we can take this later. Bayo, please, can we get on with the review?
Yes, let's start with the mangled body that was discovered on the runway. The papers are saying that it is likely that the person who stowed away onto the runway was either knocked down by a taking off aircraft or a landing aircraft. What they didn't consider, however, is that sometimes some stowaway tend to hide under the landing gear of the aircraft. So when the aircraft is about to land and it brings out the tire, sometimes if the person who is stowing away there drops, that's what happens. In fact, there was an incident that was reported near a residence near Heathrow. There had been a stowaway, I think from somewhere in Kenya, and he stowed away on an aircraft to London. By the time they got to London, he had frozen to solid block. So a man was sitting in his garden in somewhere in London near Heathrow. When the plane was about to land and the landing gear came off, the man dropped right into his compound in a solid block. So sometimes these things happen, but the security and the airport authority are trying to find out how the mangled body
but
got in there.
Isn't that the worrisome aspect of it? I mean, that nobody saw when,
If he has strayed, it means that there's a security lapse, somebody straying into the airport across the runway. And if he had managed to stow away under the aircraft, it's the same lapse of security. Yes, but let's leave it to investigation. By the time you finish investigation, we'll be able to know what happened. But meanwhile, the it's indication that the federal government has commenced payment of the arrears of to personnel of the academic staff union of Polytechnic as well as ASU regarding the minimum wage arrears. The Punch described the move as part of the move to ensure that the strike by the academic staff unions are called off. The national president of ASU, Dr. Anderson Ezeife, says that he confirmed the payment of arrears, which the chairman of ASU, Federal University of Technology, Minna, says his members have commenced to receive alert. Meanwhile, the Ladoke Akintola University of Technology has announced resumption of academic activities with effect from Thursday, the 26th of May. A circular signed by the registrar of the university, Kayode Ogunleye, says that the visitor of the university and the university management directed the resumption. An amendment academic calendar is to be made available to students while they appear on the... So that brings to about 3 state college universities that have resumed. You remember the university in Imo, another one in Delta, and now we have the Ladoke Akintola University that are now resuming. We have always pointed out that state universities had no business joining the ASU strike. Now coming to Kaduna State government says it is contemplating idea or that it may have to relocate 3 communities. That is the communities as Rijana, Kateri, and Akilibu. These 3 communities are located along the Kaduna-Abuja highway, and they are a place where most criminal activities about banditry and kidnapping happen along the Kaduna highway. The governor expressed concern about informants residing in those communities who are allegedly working with bandits. The governor, while presenting the first quarter security report, that was where he gave indication that within this first quarter alone, there were 62 persons?
360 persons
have been killed. It's so horrifying, so much so that every day you have reports about killings, so much so that our sensitivities is gradually being numbed. And people don't seem to feel it when they hear about 3 people killed, because it has become almost the order of the day.
Yeah, this is equivalent of 4 persons being killed daily.
Yes.
90 days, that's 3 months. That's
Yes.
360, 4 a day.
Governor Nasu El-Rufai also lamented that there are indications that terrorists of Ansar and Boko Haram have relocated into parts of Kaduna State. He in fact gave an indication that one of the persons who had been freed was his old classmate in his school days, and that one gave indication that he had conversation between the terrorists, saying that the forest, Kamuru Forest, is in fact better than Sambisa Forest where they are, which gave an indication that people who have migrated from Sambisa are now appreciating their new environment where they are in comparison to Sambisa Forest. The other matter of interest is also the development in Gidanwaya. Gidanwaya is in Jema local government area of Kaduna State. 4 students of the College of Education, 4 female students, were abducted on Tuesday evening. The student union president, Benjamin Fie, was the one who gave indication of this and said that even the abductors are already demanding ransom to be paid. The minister of the FCT has directed the closure of the markets and other such facilities within the Day area. The minister visited the area following the clash between Okada riders, motorcyclists, and traders at the Abuja timber market. The commercial motorcyclist was reported to have been lynched because the passenger he was carrying was knocked down and unfortunately the lady died. Several other motorcycles were set ablaze. In a reaction, 20 shops attached to the timber shed and 10 other vehicles were set ablaze. The Honorable Minister for the FCT says that this is sheer criminality and he's seeking cooperation to ensure that the perpetrators are brought to book. And also in Lagos, tension has aggravated in the Ojo local government area. This is because the police were arresting motorcyclists who dared to use their motorcycle along Mile 2 and Badagry Expressway. So the motorcyclists gathered at the police station, stormed the police station with the intention of trying to rescue their members that have been arrested. So that caused a stampede there, and a lot of persons were injured. They had to draft in the riot police and soldiers to restore law and order.
Why are we so lawless? Why do we break every law? Why I don't know what to say, Bayo. When a law is in place, the citizens are bound to comply with the law. When it is being enforced, there is a law in Lagos, and the Okada riders, are going flouting the law. So what should be done?
In fact, the last ban that was announced just this week, it wasn't the first one. One was announced about 6 months ago.
Precisely.
It was apparently ignored and almost not recognized until there was that incident at Lekki, and the governor, now out of outrage, said that no, this thing cannot continue. And he listed the areas where the motorcyclists cannot operate. Meanwhile, there is the Serki of Obalende. He has appealed that the banning of the motorcyclists is likely to affect the economic activities of certain persons.
Definitely.
And he has suggested, therefore, that there should be a means of registering and identifying the riders. If they do that in specific areas, that will help in tracing whoever commits any.
They have an association. They do have an association, and again, I think there's need. Of course, some people have mentioned the fact that they are filling in a gap. They're providing some sort of service, to the people. So outright ban might not be the solution to the problem. The solution will be to find a way of really regulating, the services they render and how they operate.
So, before time's run out, there's this human interest story I wanted to draw attention to.
Sorry,
Yes,
sorry to interject. I think the Lagos State government is quite clear about this. There is no total ban on the operation of Okada throughout Lagos State. There are areas, Etiosa, which will incorporate Ikoyi, Victoria Island, and Lekki, Apapa, Ikeja, Surulere,
mainland,
and not mainland, Lagos Island. Those are the areas where Okada operators have been told not to operate. And I don't see anything wrong with that. There's nothing to say regulate them or appropriately ensure that they are licensed and so on and so forth. There are some communities where Okada riders, they wear a vest, a flak jacket, by which they identify, they have numbers and so on and so forth. And they don't cost so much of it, but we do know the nuisance that Okada pose, not just to passengers, but to other motorists.
Yes.
And then their involvement in criminal activities. If you say, do not operate Okada in this environment, do not operate. We gave the example of the Federal Capital Territory. Right, placed a ban on the operation of Okada in Abuja City. You don't find Okada around Abuja City. And if you want to commute to the location, of course, there are alternative means of transportation for you to take. Let's also know that at some point in Abuja, you had buses that were operating in Abuja City. Bala Mohammed, as Minister of City, said, look, no, we don't, because they were also to be reasons, and they were ejected from the city. So it cannot be anywhere and everywhere.
Yes, I was talking about this human interest.
Bayo, there's a couple.
Just a minute. Just a minute. I'm sorry. We can't take more of that.
Okay, that's all right.
I'm sorry.
Don't worry. It's a human interest story. We can always take it any other day.
Thank you, Bayo. Thank you for your understanding. Please do have a good weekend.
You too.
Yes, and stay out of trouble. All right. This is Good Morning Nigeria. When we come back, we'll begin our conversation. Don't go away.
You're watching Good Morning Nigeria. We're live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. Now, before we begin our conversation on the diminishing value for human life in Nigeria, our correspondent Oyemi Ajayi went to the streets of Abuja to find out from a cross-section of Nigerians what they think is responsible for this unsalutary state of affairs. That's to say, the diminishing value for life in our country.
Okay, the first thing that will come to my mind is lack of proper orientation. People are not properly oriented about basic things. There are some things that I would not do that are not ingrained into some other people, and because of this, they just because if the value of life is intrinsic in me, is basic, I don't think I will even think of hurting my neighbor, not talk of just killing them because they don't believe in what I believe in.
Well, poverty is one of them. And then if you look at most of these people who are used to do this killing, they are on drugs. So there's issue of proliferation of drugs in this country.
An intolerance for life, for human life, and like I said, education, and probably environmental factors too. It boils down to the environment that you grow in. There are some environments that just feel there is no much value attached to life now, which is not right.
The first point there is that there is no fear of God. People did not cherish God, because if ever they know there is God, irrespective of whether religion or not, because I believe Christian, Muslim, we call on this God, and we shall all report back to Him. Then apart from the religious part of it, the other side is that, well, I will more or less put it that probably lack of home training. I will not say the religious have not done their own. The religious have done its own. I think we have to go back to where we started from. We go back to the civic in schools.
I believe if somebody, as an Igbo man anyway, maybe I could see an fellow Igbo man fighting with another person. I don't need to just, because it's an Igbo man, I start fighting the other tribe, you know. First of all, I should be able to find out what actually was the cause of that fight. Apportion blame to whom is supposed to apportion blame to, instead of going into mob action.
Many thanks to you, Oyemi Ajayi, for that background. Very interesting perspectives that those respondents have raised. They touched on the issue of reason. They touched on the issue of religion. They also looked at some psychological, coloration, and then, of course, they looked at intrinsic value. Very interesting perspectives. So we'll get to those perspectives in just a moment. We have right here in the studio to speak further or to give more meaning to this topic, value for human life. We have Dr. Oke Ikechukwu. He's the Executive Director, Development Specs Academy. He joins us here in our studio. Thank you very much, Dr. Ikechukwu. It's been a while.
It has. But I'm still familiar with the terrain. I could find my way.
That's good. Also joining us here in the studio is Dr. Joseph Ochogu, Associate Research Professor and Director, Research and Policy Analysis, Institute for Peace and Conflict Resolution. Dr. Ochogu, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much. Good morning, Nigerians.
Okay, and joining this conversation via Zoom is the Most Reverend Ale Buba Lamido, the Bishop of Usasa Diocese. Most Reverend Lamido, pleasure to have you with us on this conversation this morning.
Good morning, and pleasure of having me too.
All right. We will also be joined by the conversation later on by an imam to provide the other perspective to this discussion. Gentlemen, let's just begin by trying to make sense of the times that we live in. We're reading the headlines in the newspapers this morning, and the Kaduna State government is indicating that in 3 months, 360 persons have been killed. That's to say, innocent lives have been lost. And 3 months will be equivalent of 90 days. That's to say, 4 lives every day. That is in Kaduna State. In different parts of the country, elsewhere in the northwest, in the northeast, in the southeast, in the south-south, in the southwest, daily reports of lives being taken unlawfully. And it would appear that most people just go about their normal business. And as my colleague Claire and I were discussing, it appears to be something that happens to other people until it comes pretty close. Gentlemen, what's is it a state of anomy or some evil genius just out there? Okay.
Well, anomy, evil genie. No, there's no evil genie. If there's evil genie and you're a believer, why did he get you? So that's out of it. Anomy to an extent because you have bad example from the leadership. But starting from the statistics you gave, the first thing to state is that the Kaduna State statistics is open to question for a simple reason. How good is any state with data? So he's talking about what he knows. Chances are that the numbers are much higher. But let's look at the variables creating all of this. For me, first of all, I'm not surprised at all at what's going on. It took a long time in building up. What are the variables that have led to this? Number one, wrong role models at the level of leadership, making people want to aspire to become more wealthy rather than more useful, to become more visible rather than more impactful in a positive sense. And so as I am in office, I'm moving around with a fleet of vehicles. People are looking at me and saying, I want to be like that man. Because they knew that a month or 2 or 6 months or a year ago, I couldn't eat. But all of a sudden, I'm very wealthy. So that becomes an issue. Secondly, you look at the number of young people who have no capacity, no ability to engage. They have no skills, they're out of school. And then there's poverty and hunger. And so survival, the desire for survival replaces their sense of right and wrong. That's another factor. Then you then find that with poverty, with hunger, with so many things on the table, people begin to look for means of economic salvation from sources other than the rational. And so they go to prayer houses, they listen to those who make promises. What happens with that is that progressively they replace the contents of the holy books with what they hear from the pulpit. And so that the person's behavior is absolutely inconsistent with the teachings of his religion, but he calls himself a Christian, he calls himself a Muslim, because he has replaced somebody who talks in the name of those religions for the substance of the religion. They're actually unbelievers, but they do not know. Further at the social level, you have now more indigents of their localities than citizens of Nigeria. Because any conversation is about us. And when you look at the us, if there are 9 people, there are 9 us's. So conversation is exclusivist, loyalty is exclusivist, care is exclusivist. And so small pockets of we and small pockets of them identify objects of attack or non-attack based on purely economic interests, but it's woven into religion. So you find that as values, civic values like you mentioned, as values of community vanish, people then only are primed to wait for anything that comes in the direction of what they don't like or what they don't want. And so the concept of human life, which you would have acquired through physics, through proper home training, through education, through association, in an integrated nation, you no longer have it. This is a country where you used to have student exchange programs. Bala, my friend from Kachia in Southern Zaria, his secondary education was in, in Fisher High School, Omaha. And you have all of that where people used to, an Igbo man won elections in office. In Lagos, somebody from Kano won election in Enugu. Now, what is all of this leading to? National disintegration, value disintegration, a disconnect between the younger generation and the older generation, the absence of mentoring in addition to poor parenting. Then on top of this, you have a lot of children out of school. So the concepts of right and wrong are now a question of how do I feel? They've been demobilized. And the worst element in all of this is that even if you want to engage, the enablement to do so is problematic at 2 levels, at the level of statistics and the level of examples. At the level of statistics, we've been operating with this idea that we have now 13 million children out of school. Simple. If it's true that there are 3 million children out of school in Ghana, you assume every state of the federation has only 500,000 out of school, is above that number. If you use the last national population figures and the school population figures, from that figure, the number of children who should be in primary school was 11.something million. The actual number is school, 23 million. At the secondary level, the number that should be in school, 33.9 million, the actual number in school, 6.4. Put that together. You have a massive population that are not part of our national conversation. And so when you speak of behaving well, of being human, you can discuss it where it's nice to talk. Not in those shanties where they live, not in places where they know that if they don't go out every day, they won't eat. And the day they will eat is to go either be a tout, carry things in the market, drive your Okada, make your return and keep. So the skills you need for survival are not skills of civility. You need to be nasty, you need to be rough, you need to quickly, as they say, widen your eyes. Now put all of that together. What happened in day-to-day is perfectly understandable.
Okay, let's pause Dr. Ikechukwu for a while. You've looked at the opening, your opening contribution from the perspective of, society and maybe wants to be fulfilled precisely. But I'd like us to also ask, do people really understand that human life is a value to be preserved? And I'm bringing in the bishop, I think the bishop that's joining us from via Zoom, Bishop of Wusasa Diocese, Reverend Ali Buba Lamido. Do people really understand that the human life is a cardinal value that ought to be preserved? Why should why should we preserve a person and not, other animals that equally have similar, same life or same souls?
Thank you very much. God has created man as a higher being and quite different from other animals. In scripture, we are told that God created us in his own image, giving us supremacy over all other animals. So we differ. And that is why we have intellect and we can think and do things differently from animals, even controlling animals. However, many people do not realize this creation of God and having humans as supreme order over other animals. And that is why you have the behavioral tendencies of man changing and behaving almost like animals themselves. But talking about human value, you can see we have lost a lot in our country. And part of the reason why we lost this, it originates probably from the family. The family is fast failing today in our society. Lack of inculcation of the values, the norms, the culture of society is absent. And that also goes on to the larger community or society. And many people do not know the values and the values of human life in the society, simply because they have lost that knowledge and interaction with family life in the society. But if you look at it as a whole, lack of education in the family, but lack of also proper education by the society. We have quite a bunch of dropouts from schools. Many people today, especially the young, are not in school. And we can also say that many people are also not privileged to go to school today, even though these are available, and you look at their behavior simply because they lack education, especially citizenry education, which is lacking in our youths. So that is why we have this misbehavior in our society. Many people at the slightest provocation, because of the differences that has been within the society, differences of ethnicity, religion, and so on. And when an event happens, it could even be an accident. And the narration that will simply be given immediately is that of ethnicity or religious. And it goes on to change into violence. And you have people taking lives of people, destroying their property simply because they do not understand the value of human life. But also, there's a lot of emphasis in Nigeria.
We have a freeze there from the Zoom connection to the Lord Bishop of Usasa Diocese, the Most Reverend Lamido. If the Zoom connection is back, we'll continue with him. Otherwise, we'll return to the studios. We are back on.
Oh, thank you. Now, these differences that are given different narratives, as in ethnicity and religious, they divide people. So people are identifying themselves by their tribes, not as Nigerians anymore. They identify themselves by the religion or faith they believe in. And so at the slightest provocation of one of them, you discover that there is violence. Even if it affects them or not, they engage in violence. But also idleness by our youths and people is very common. There are many people doing nothing. In other words, joblessness, having nothing to do. So violence gives them an opportunity.
Once again, the Zoom is frozen. We'll return to the Bishop of Usasa Diocese later on in the course of the conversation. Now back to the studios here. Dr. Joseph Ochogo, let's have your initial salvo on what is playing out. The human being is supposed, and indeed is, at the apex of all living creatures. But the way we have diminished the value of that human being in Nigeria in recent times would appear to tell us something otherwise and very worrisome about how we regard this human life that ordinarily should be preserved and nurtured. What's happening?
Okay, thank you very much. I think my colleagues have said a lot. I won't bother to reiterate what they have said. But I think that it's important to note that in the evolution of any society or the construction of any society, it's important to look at the processes of socialization. If you value human life, it means that all the processes of socialization that will help to entrench that value is there across all categories of the population of that particular society. If that process of socialization is not right, then you begin to suffer the kind of things we are suffering in Nigeria. And I think with what happened in Sokoto, it just crossed my mind that we've actually been perhaps doing the wrong thing or talking to the wrong audience in terms of building a better society. because there is this mass of population, that have been isolated, and I would say excluded, and they become much more vulnerable to negative socialization. And that is what we find around. And it is not only Sokoto State. I'm sorry to say that it's across all parts of this country in terms of how we value life. If you have a society that value life, for example, you won't allow Okada driving, particularly without helmet, as a basis for transportation, primary basis for transportation. And what we have across the country is that. So the point to note is that there is a whole lot, to be done by agencies of government and agencies of civil society organizations in terms of how we want to construct our society to value the life of people, of our people. The value for life starts from the point of conception to the point of death. So if we want to value human life, why do we create a health services system? That the rate of maternal and childbirth is high and has not reduced over time. So if we value human life, we must put in place all the necessary structures, processes, and procedure to ensure that even a single life that is lost, even at a natal level, there is a bit of accountability, to why we lost that life. So at that level, you see that we have a problem. At the point of death, for example, it is nearly only in this country you find maybe vehicle hits somebody and there is a dead body in the gutter, and it takes maybe a day or two before the necessary agency of responsibility comes to pick that dead. So the value of life here is very, very minimal. And I'm saying it because it's a multifaceted problem. Because if you say your roads, for example, in terms of your infrastructure for road, for example, how much value does that infrastructure place on the value of the passenger or the driver on the road who is driving stretches of kilometers of a road that is likely going to kill him, in terms of either through accident, in terms of either safety by armed robbery or bandits and all that. So the point I'm trying to make is that we, on our own, either consciously or unconsciously, taking ourselves to the place whereby the value of life in Nigeria, it's on the negative. That is to say, we don't have much value for life. And if you think I'm joking, perhaps let there be an emergency and see the level of either slow or very, very weak response to that kind of emergency. So it's a crisis. And I must say it's a crisis. It's a crisis that will take a lot of superior, intelligent thinking, that is creative and innovative thinking, to address this problem. It is beyond the normal politics that we have in our system. It has to do with men and women of great intellect, who can think very well for society, and then society to run with them to begin to address this thing. Otherwise, we are gradually running into a situation whereby we might not be able to address. Our politics, for example, has to emphasize the issue of value for life. Where the political class, for example, do not value life the way we are talking about it, because if you value life, for example, you won't gather people there unnecessarily to crowd them in such a place that there could be an emergency. So we need to really work our educational system, because what happens now, we are looking at perhaps those who are out of school or those who are unreached, in terms of value for life. What of our institutions of learning? What is really the value of life in our institutions of learning if you talk about cultism? If you talk about the average habitation of the number of students in a hostel accommodation and the air they need to breathe in a very small space, you have up to 10 to 20 people, inhabiting that kind of accommodation. It is the fact that we place less value. Because when we talk about value for life, we are talking about the well-being of our citizens. And our constitutions make explicit provision, for the well-being, prosperity, peace, and unity of Nigerians. Where we on our own abuse our constitutions because we don't go by those rules, then we are in problem. A second thing to look at again is that what are the things that are available to make the value of life less and make people take life easily? You look at the issue of drugs, which I think one of my colleagues has mentioned initially. The drugs, if you look at the Boko Haram crisis, for example, And I've said it before, and I'm going to say it again. It is not really easy to take a human life. It is not easy. The person who is going to take another person's life must be under one influence or the other. One, either at the level of religious extremism, which is ideological in terms of values that the person has imbibed, or two, easy accessibility of the instrument of violence to easily kill somebody, which one has to do with drugs, under a serious influence of drug, and then easy availability of maybe small arms, light weapons, or an instrument, which again, I think that there are regulatory agencies, that can help mitigate some of these incidences. There are gory pictures we've seen from the northeast, from the northwest, from the southeast, and even from the southwest, and even from the south-south and the north central, on how human lives are cheaply taken in this country.
Dr. Chogo, thank you. Let's keep you on pause for a moment so you don't fast forward us to, to the end of the program.
Sure.
But this much we have all said, that we do not value human life. I mean, all the incidents, all the gory pictures have, shown that, helped us to arrive at that conclusion. But my question to Dr. Ikechukwu will be, why? Is it, and I'd like you to look at it, let's go from the beginning. I'd like you to look at it from the philosophic perspective. Is it that the value of life, value for human life, or value of life, is it a subjective perception, or is it an objective, value? By objective, I mean, is it a universal concept?
It's supposed to be normative, not subjective. Even though normative values can be subjective, it's supposed to be normative. But the distinction to note, first of all, is that we make a distinction between norms and what we've learned in school. I can be a professor of ethics. Ethics is about moral values and how to behave. And I'm one of those funding people who are killing. That's the contradiction, isn't it? The reason is simple. I have not internalized the norms, but I have academic information about norms. So you see that formal education is part of the crisis. The mistaken assumption that if I've gone to a school, I've gone to university, I'm a doctor, a professor, I am necessarily better informed as a human being than the other person. So most of the time, they have the wrong references as authority. At the social level too, I am holding public office. I'm a governor, or I'm a senator, or a minister, or a head of parastatal. I dress better, I can spend better. People have limited access to me. People also then automatically assume that I can be a reference of value. And so what you then see is that norms that ought to be objective are now made subjective. Why do I say respect for life is normative and objective? The basic principles. What are the things that must keep happening for this studio to be in place as a studio? If you get the answer to that question, they're objective. They can never change, except there are changes in the values, what a studio should do. So what is a human being? A creature that needs certain things. When he's born, he's totally helpless, so he must have parents. Also, the woman is also largely helpless, so she must have some kind of support. Now, if they live just by themselves, it won't work. They can't meet all their needs. So the concept of community emerges. In that community, if he does what he likes, you do what you like. Kingsley does what he likes, which I know for sure. What do you get? Clash of interest and belligerence. So, no, laws come in to ensure that the norms that will guarantee existence of humanity are in place. You now tell people, no, if somebody misbehaves, tell him not to. But when children are born, not their parents can teach them everything they need to know. So teaching comes into it, etc. Grooming of the human being as a citizen, as a person who must live harmoniously with others. Now, those are the normative values that define our humanity. So it's from this philosophical perspective you can then say that the value of life is itself inviolable, unless we don't want to be human. Because if you can take my life, I can take my life. You've taken away the primary principle that could define us. Now you move it further into wider society, and those values are being progressively destroyed because instead of enforcing the norms, impunity is being allowed, titles are being allowed to replace substance, new generations are emerging without guidance, so that you see human life as necessary for maintaining human society has become an increasingly meaningless concept for a growing population. With the meaninglessness of that, what they value is material survival. Human perception of norms will make you, like, let's assume somebody in this studio has 50 naira in his pocket and I need money badly. And I look left and right and I go and kill him and take the money. It is not because I need money that I kill him. It's because I'm not really human. I'm not living by any norms. Because if it's because I have money, then once anybody needs money, his instinct will be to kill. Since there's something that restrains people, the question is, why have those things moved back? And I try to, the atomization of the Nigerian society. If you go to day where that thing happened, you're likely to find that each group holds its meetings, decides this is what is in our interest, with no reference to the other group. So both are perpetually on the lookout. Isn't there somebody representing that place in the National Assembly? Isn't there a senator that covers that area? And that's why I think that, you see, if you're in charge of an area as a representative, you meet regularly, isn't it? What do you need to do? Many institutions at the federal level can't deal with these things. Go there and meet with all the youth leaders, church youth leaders, political youth leaders, cultural youth leaders, community leaders. Not go there and give them money and they call you leader. Tell the elderly people that, look, these children will be the ones to kill you if you don't make them behave well. You tell the younger ones, you give them an example. All of us have the experiences from our lives of younger peers who have died long ago or who chose the path of rascality they ended. And you say, I'm sure among all of you, you know some of your friends or community children who have died from drugs. Look, this man, I'm your representative today. These are the reasons. Now, by the time you're presenting this, you're talking about reclaiming of the youth. And this has to happen. Service to the people is not Abuja. It's not state assemblies. It's living among them. And you know, when you've done work like this, you speak with some certainty. I've done it in a state. By the time each ward, I make sure I took 12 male, 8 female, migrated it all the youth. But you keep doing that, you see, you are likely to have between 20 and 40% success. That's already an excess of the quantity you need to introduce change. You give the incentives to those who are going by the norms, and gradually, it's not to go and organize the rally and tell them to be of good behavior. Invite somebody who read a lecture for 45 minutes, and by the time he finishes defining the meaning of good behavior, half of them are asleep. No, this is still, sleeves up, hand-on job down there. Those children are not bad. They are not trying to be bad. They have absorbed the only norms they think they need to survive. That's a more serious problem than being bad.
They've been left to become bad. That's part of the socialization.
No, they were not socialized onto the human norms. They only developed the instincts for survival. You, like a blind animal, you get the smell of the kind of thing you want, you go for it.
I also like you to stay. Is there anything intrinsic about the human life that makes it important, for everyone to protect it?
Yes, there is. To begin with, from the mundane, animals don't eat their children, most of them. Preservation of the entity is a basic fact of life. Now, in human life, if you look at its impact on the wider environment, you know it's important to keep it human and live by certain things. Only human beings have destroyed the earth that we live in. Global warming, the loss of ice is from our activity. Progressive dehumanization leads also to progressive violation of the norms of survival. We're not living in an unsustainable society because that fundamental perception has disappeared from most of the places. Is there an intrinsic reason? Yes, there is an intrinsic reason. The intrinsic reason is that human beings cannot successfully live solitary lives like wild animals. They cannot truly be and develop all their virtues if they are not going by certain norms. To that extent, violation of those norms leads to increasing dehumanization. That's why you don't say bad people. That's why the distinction between a human being and a barbarian. Barbarian is like an animal living purely on instinct, not on intellect, not on intuition. That is anything. It only knows, I want this. So anything standing in the way must be clear to get there. Now, if you live by those principles, the world we have today wouldn't exist. There won't be science. There won't be anything. I could say I like this TV camera and take it and go. So barbarism cannot be the aspiration of the modern state. And when the bulk of the citizens are inclining towards barbarism, there's every reason to say, hey, what is wrong? But critically on all of that, the power centers are out to give orientation, are absent on the job because positions are now taken for means of livelihood and for doing big boy and big girl. So the decade continues.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much there for your perspective. We earlier indicated that we'll be joined by another guest, and let's welcome Professor Mohammed Hamdani, Professor Mohammed Hamdani, Director of Peace and Anti-Conflict Journalism Research Center at Base University in Abuja. He's also the Chief Imam of the Harmony Estate Mosque here in the Federal Capital Territory. Professor Hamdani, it's our pleasure to welcome you to the conversation on the diminishing value for life in our country. Let's have your opening take on what appears to be a worrisome subject matter. Everywhere you turn in the country, there's so much bloodletting, and it appears that there's no end in sight.
So first of all, thank you very much for having me on this program. My opening take, I think I would like to take from where the immediate past speaker start. I like that question of whether there is something intrinsically valuable about human life which makes it bad to kill a human being. This is a philosophical question, and while he was talking about that, I was wondering what value is that going to add to the conversation. It's a philosophical question that you look at it from a moralist perspective, from the religious perspective, and all of that. Some people will tell you that, well, if I can kill a human being and get away with it, I'm going to kill him, something like that, right? So, in the situation we are in Nigeria, we see the real repercussion of killing other human beings, and we see ourselves drifting into anarchy. I don't even think that is the kind of question we should be asking. I think we should be asking about the damaging impact of killing other human beings and the damaging impact of letting our kids becoming such heartless people at whatever point they can just unleash mayhem and start killing people. We see that in our society. We see it play out, and we see the problems, and we see the lack of progress. And we should be talking about what are the causes, where is this coming from, and what are we supposed to do about this? Because if we are to go back to that kind of conversation about what is intrinsically valuable about human life, as a result of which we should include human being, this will take us to the kind of conversations taking place in a very, very advanced country where these kind of killings are not happening, right? They're so advanced that they can be able to have these conversations for the fun of it, you can say. But here in this country, no, we should go much. We didn't even get to that point. We have a problem in our hands. We need to talk about where is this coming from. And talking about where this is coming from, I would point very quickly to our mosques and churches. It's very painful to say that, but we have to call a spade a spade. We have been in a situation whereby our religious leaders have been preaching hatred for far too long, and something has to be done about this. You can't just go in the name of God and preach that for you to build your religion, you have to destroy the religion of another. For you to survive, you have to destroy another. We can't keep doing this. This is not right, and we know that it is not right, and we should not continue to do this. We have done this in the name of God. We have done this in the name of politics. We have done this in the name of tribes. We have done this in the name of states. We have done this in so many different names. And you see, this kind of inspired me something. It told me something. If you don't have conscience, Nigeria is the easiest country in which to be a leader. If you have conscience, Nigeria is the most difficult country to be a leader because of all these problems. What I mean by that is if you don't have conscience, it's very easy to ride on the gullibility and the emotional sentiments of Nigerian people based on religion, based on tribe, based on whatever, and crave for popularity and gain the popularity actually and keep moving. And at the slightest opportunity, you preach hatred, you play within the gallery of people's emotions and sentiments and incite them, and you become very popular, and they see you as the messiah, and they go start killing one another when you are maybe in Abuja in your estate and enjoying your peace and all of that. This is really bad, and we have to collectively come together and do something about this. This would be my take.
Thank you, Professor Hamdani. And let me welcome you to the program myself. Just a point of clarification. The question about the intrinsic value in human life that makes it, that makes it impossible or bad for anyone to take life. I asked that question because a lot of people really do not know that the human life is a value or have values that ought to be, protected. And Dr. Ikechukwu gave us some of those values. Now, if we know that there's an intrinsic value, the value of self-preservation, the value of reproduction, continuity, the value, even if the value of life itself, that you are a higher soul. Most people, even in churches and mosques, you teach these values to the congregation. And that's why I'm going to ask you my next question. I know in Islam, there is a concept you call the usul al-fiqh. I don't know if you know that. It's a kind of teaching that relates, that tells you why you must not kill a fellow human being. It gives you the reason why it is bad, or why the religious condemn the killing of another human being. Can you speak to us about that concept?
Okay, thank you very much for that question. You are still taking us back to the intrinsic value of
Yes,
life.
because we need to know that life itself
life is valuable.
Exactly.
I believe that life is valuable,
Yes.
and I believe that you believe that life is valuable, and I believe that everyone in this room believes that life is valuable. But that is not the question here.
Those who kill do not see what you're saying.
But that is not the question here. That is not the question here. The question is, you're talking about something that is very philosophical, and philosophers can differ about it. That is the reason why I'm saying that raising this question at this point in time is not even right. It's very dangerous, because what if you have philosophers in Nigeria who are trying to who are going by the opinion that life is not intrinsically valuable, and we don't have shortages of those, right? That is the reason why I would have preferred that we talk about these things from the very realistic perspective, the realism perspective, that this is the problem we have at our hand. Let's face it and solve it.
Sorry to interject. So that we don't get out of the purview of our conversation. Yes, can you now look at the issue of that provision in Islam?
I'll come back to look at that. I'll come back to look at that. But I needed to do that clarification about that philosophical question that I wish has never been raised in this forum. And then going back to the Islamic perspective about life, you talk about usul al-fiqh. In usul al-fiqh is actually what is known in the rough rendering in English is the principles of Islamic jurisprudence. The principles of Islamic jurisprudence, what it does, it explains to you the reason behind the Islamic rulings. If Islam says you should pray, then usul al-fiqh will tell you the reason why you are being asked to do that, right? Okay, fundamentally speaking, usul al-fiqh tells us that Islam has some major goals, what Islam wants to achieve, right? And these major goals, they are called al-usul al-khamsa. That's the 5 major goals that Islam wants to achieve. And the first one of those is preservation of human life. And the second one is the preservation of human religion. And the third one is preservation of human sanity. And then preservation of human property. And then preservation of human family. These are the 5 major goals that Islam wants to achieve. Whatever Islam asks you to do, it's in the process of trying to achieve these major 5 goals that are called al-ayatul khamsa or al-usul al-khamsa. They have different names, right?
With respect to the preservation of human life,
which is the very first and the most important and the fundamental. The reason I was insisting that we should raise the issue from the philosophical question is because religion took a stand that is entirely different from the philosophical stand about human life. Religion, not just Islam, all religions are pro-life. Not all philosophies are pro-life, right? That is the reason I didn't want to drift into that. Nigeria, we have problem, and we oftentimes say that religion, or people are using religion is the problem and this and that, but I look at religion as the victim of the circumstance rather than the actual problem. We use religion when it suits us, because when in Islam, for example, you have human life as the very first goal that Islam wants to preserve, and then you go about taking human life in the name of religion, you're actually using religion rather than serving the religion, right? So Islam wants to preserve life, and we know that Islam has been doing a lot to preserve human life. But the fact that we have some Muslims or some Christians doing one thing or another to take human life is really a despicable thing that is happening in the society, and that is why I'm saying that all of us should come together, do something about this. We should recognize this as a problem and then take steps towards solving this problem.
All right, Professor Hamdani, thank you very much for your perspective. Dr. Joseph Ochogo, I want to come back to you. There is a recognition of the failure of the various agencies of civilization. And therefore, the reason why we are having this existential challenge of almost near total disregard for human life. And as my colleague and I indicated at the commencement of this conversation, when human life is taken, every other person else goes about their so-called normal business. And if it's close enough to home, every other person else will also go about their normal business. How do we begin to, in a sense, restore our humanity and frown at a wanton dispatch of human life? It is not just human life. Human life itself is also meaningless without a sense of property. You see, destruction of life and property, they almost just, they are coterminous. But of course, because the human life is at the apex, that's why we are taking that now. As they are killing, they are burning properties, like burning livelihoods, and therefore rendering such persons opposite. So how do we get, if you may, into the minds of perpetrators? They are small in number, but the consequences of their conduct are certainly more than what one is almost imagining in this circumstance.
Okay. Like I said, we are creating a society, that is making this vulnerability very prevalent. And when I'm saying that is that, why I'm saying it is that we are having a significant number of our population, that are increasingly being marginalized out of the mainstream economy. And when you have those significant number of youthful population, that are valuable at any slightest provocation, to either kill, harm, destroy, or steal, then you know that you have a crisis at hand. It is not the issue about the dehumanization we have in the society is not so much about issues around religion. In Abuja, for example, I think about 2-3 months back, you discovered that nearly all the significant manholes on the highways were being removed. And there was a terrible accident, I think, around somewhere between Grand Square and when you are coming towards NNPC, where a vehicle, almost 3-4 vehicles had rammed into those manholes and all that. And who were the culprits of those things? Culprits of people who are removing those manholes, people who don't even have value, even for the road. All they wanted was take these manholes that are metals, and then go and sell it, and then get your stipends, and then move on. So as a society, we need to look at some of the things. I'm happy that the Commissioner of Police, FCT Police, decided to clamp down on those miscreants and all that. But you see, it's a national problem. When you talk about issues around infrastructure and all that, you call them miscreants, but they are available everywhere now, even in your village, looking for iron or metal or whatever.
Scrap metals.
Scrap metals. And I think that this is just one angle I'm just talking about now. This is where we need regulatory agencies, sanctioning mechanisms, to ensure that people don't repeat certain kind of things, that endanger the life of fellow human beings. Also, if you look at these other populations that we are talking about, how do we make our youthful population vulnerable, to some violent extremism through religious radicalization? I think that the governor of Kaduna State some years back talked about issues about regulation. There is no society that does not regulate certain things, even though in the constitution the provision is made there, for religion, for freedom. The fact that that freedom is there does not mean that you should infringe on the right of another person due to the way you proselytize. So we need to advance a bit on what we have in our books in terms of how we get our citizens and people to do certain things in our constitution. And sadly, we are not really doing that, because primarily what we are concerned about is issues around allocations and issues around contracting and the dispensing of this allocation. The real core, which is the heart of government, which is the issue around governance, we are completely missing the point. I think that my colleague said about the positions and issues around leadership and big boy, big woman thing and all that. I think that is the fashion. And that is the kind of socialization too that is being mirrored down the line there. And also, if you look at the socialization of violence, that our youthful population are going through movies, and then the fact too that people are not sanctioned or apprehended, then there is a tendency to repeat of these incidences. If you kill someone, the problem is there, even in the penal code, even in the law, against why you shouldn't take another person's life. So if you take another person's life, what is the repercussion, from the angle of law? In Nigeria, for example, even though they said the international human rights community have said that issues around hanging is outdated and states should not hang, but we have provision in our law, that says people should hang. How many people in the last 20 years across the 36 states of the Federation, including FCT, have hanged one or two persons?
In the meantime, in
the executive governors.
In the meantime, in 90 days, 360 persons have been unlawfully wiped out in Kaduna.
Yes. So, and I heard from that same data that over 1,600 and something culprits were arrested. What is the sanctioning mechanisms against those elements so that it does not occur again? Because what we are having is
and where do you even keep them?
Yeah, of course we'll talk about where we keep them. But if the law says, for example, they should be hanged, and the judgment from a competent court of law have said hang these people, why would the chief executive of a state, for example, be finding it difficult to sign that off and reduce this number, in society? But as long as we are not ready to do certain things, as provided by our own law, then we should be ready for the repercussions of this thing. So I think that there is need for proper regulations. There is need for sanctioning mechanisms, effective sanctioning mechanisms to deter, this thing from reoccurring again and all that. But as long as we are not doing these two things, putting the regulatory mechanisms in place and the ones that are already implementing it effectively, and sanctioning mechanisms against those offenders take lives of people, then we should be ready for worst case scenario. And we are seeing proliferations of these murderers across the nooks and crannies of the country, because murder in Nigeria today has become liberalized.
All right,
because it is infused with our politics and infused with our economics and beginning to become gradually our norm if we are not careful.
Okay.
That's the new normal.
The new normal.
Dr. Chago, thank you. just before we go on a short break, we'd just like Reverend Ali Lamido to also say a few words. Reverend Lamido, what is your own perspective? You just listened to Dr. Ochogu talk about weakness of law enforcement. Do you also think that there could be psychological, aspect to what is happening at the moment?
Yes, sure. The psychological perspective of what is happening today may be due to the situation generally in which we find ourselves in the country. Just knowing that all over the country is not well, there are violence almost all over the country, including kidnappings and so on, is enough to throw one into trauma. And once a person is traumatic, is bound to do anything. But I want to.
All right, we do apologize for the break in that connection. When we do come back from this break, we'll return to Reverend Lamido to continue if we do establish contact with him. Let's take a short break now.
All right, welcome back, and you're still watching Good Morning Nigeria. We're live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. All our 4 guests are still with us, but the Zoom connection to the Lord Bishop of Wasa Diocese, we understand, is suffering from some low bandwidth at the moment, and therefore quite unstable. But if it does come back straight on, we will take him. Now, back to the studios here, Professor Mohammed Hamdani. Professor Mohammed Hamdani, let's take a look at the issue this way. What we find is that it is not necessarily every Nigerian who is out there that is taking another life. We may not have a categorization of who these persons are, but their actions and the consequences of actions are there with us every day. They don't value their own lives and therefore do not value the lives of others. What mechanisms can we actuate to reduce this tendency, this barbarism that has been described, or what Dr. Ochogu has labeled as the realization of murder in our country?
Thank you very much for that mechanism to put in place in order to be able to mitigate this liberalization of killing others. I think we have to look at the way in which a normal human society functions and is supposed to function, and then see where we are getting it wrong. And I think we have to start with the smallest unit of human society, starting from the family, and then look at the kind of upbringing we are giving to our kids. We train our kids in Nigeria based on judging the right and wrong all the time, to the point of putting almost everyone in the society on the fence. Like, it's a very normal thing for a Nigerian to be obsessed by being right because he's been judged in his life from the very young age. And so we have to look at that first of all, and then we go to the second unit of the society, which is the community, starting from school, and then see the kind of curriculums we have in place. What are we really teaching our kids about human life? Do we have any subject in primary school, in secondary school, that is teaching those kids about the value of human life? And what are we doing when the kid gets to the university? Are we doing anything in terms of the interaction between the teachers and the students, and in terms of the curriculum, and in terms of the general overview of what is happening there? And then you move on to the government. Or maybe before you move on to the government, you move on to the religious leaders and the traditional leaders who are at the very grassroots and interacting with these people on a daily basis. What are we doing at that stage? We need to look at that. And then we get to the government. government and we get to the laws and making sure that the laws, because we have the laws, like has been mentioned by one of the speakers here, but only that the laws are not being implemented. But my idea of it, why don't we try to eliminate this before it even gets to the court, before the person even gets to kill another person? Why don't we try to train this generation of people coming up now in a way that they know that they shouldn't even do this, they shouldn't even commit this crime, that they should know that killing another person is a crime, not just against the government, but even against the person killing another person, because this is something that is going to haunt you throughout your life. And it's a crime against community, it's a crime against your religion, and then let the person internalize this and know that it's not something that he should go about doing, right? So these are some of the things that I think should be done so that we instigate this problem that we have.
All right. I would like to ask Dr. Ikechukwu, who has a greater role to play in all of this?
Everybody has a significant role to play, because it's if you want to build a church or mosque, somebody has to clear the ground. That person is important. Then people dig the foundation. They are important. You begin to build. And then until you come to the interior decor, that's very lovely. So let's structure it like that. Right now, we have this thing going on. And where can we begin to make interventions? Speaking to people, it will take time for them to even understand the need to listen to you. The incentives for behavior change exist in killing because they paid for it. Your talk is going to affect their means of livelihood. So what do you do first? Minimize the opportunity to kill. And that's where enforcement and management of the environment comes in. 2004, I led the Nigerian delegation, Nollywood, to the 2004 New York Film Festival. We landed at JFK and had to go to Maryland. We went by road. The person taking us 10 minutes into the drive, he said he was feeling sleepy, I should drive. Now, I didn't have a license to drive in the... So it was almost 1:30 a.m. So, and the I-95 is a straight road from there to Maryland. It's just that it's about 2.5, 3 hours. So what transpired on the way, he told me, don't go beyond 70 miles, which was 110 kilometers. And I looked at it. He had this fine machine, that 3.6 liter engine or more. And the road was a 6-lane road. There was nobody on the road, and it was 1-2 a.m. He said, no, don't go above 110 kilometers. They will flag you down. So as he finished, as he was talking, and I was looking at it, it's unfair to this vehicle to drive 120 on a 6-lane road at 1-2 a.m. Just 3 minutes after he spoke, as we were coming close, I saw this thing of a vehicle. I said, well, he said, no, they're all over the road. So once you drive at a certain speed, the speed gauge, they'll just follow us and stop us. I was of good behavior throughout the journey. Now you're talking about people picking manhole covers. It's policing, not preaching, that will stop it. That's one. If you do that, the opportunity reduces. Now, when there is disincentive for bad behavior, the compulsion to do good behavior becomes mandatory. Yes, there was a blackout, I think, in the UK some 4 or 5 years ago. If you remember, supermarkets were looted, not by people from Nyanya or from Ojuelebo or from Onitsha. The same well-being residents. So law enforcement is a critical success factor. With that, when the opportunities to misbehave decline, you're forced to begin to comply progressively with approved behavior. So that's when you can now talk about, now you've minimized the opportunity, you reach out to community leaders, you reach out to youth leaders, give them examples of previous youth leaders who had died in their community, or ask them to give you what killed them. Smoking, carrying people out in the night and all of that. Now that's how you rebuild society. Those in office also should minimize the perception that is entitlement to privilege. They should show that it's work. Then you're talking at the national level. Is at that level that you can then begin to move up to the national. I see the National Orientation Agency advertising regularly on this program. This is the job of the National Orientation Agency, which it was doing well all along. But the question we must ask today is that agency funded? And it's not about this government, so let nobody bring in PPAPC. How has it not been funded over the years? When I was in the Ministry of Information, they said to the minister, the agency was doing very well. The minister was personally interested because he understood its role. Now, even when the minister is hamstrung, as it is today, and funding, is information really funded? I'll cite one example and probably try to round up on that. If you're building a road from here to Badagry today, and it's 200 billion, you provide the budget and everything. Everybody forgets that controversies will arise on the road. It's ancestral land, this and that. When that comes and they are now attacking government, you start shouting Ministry of Information. Did you include information budget in that 200 billion? No. That's one thing we keep overlooking. So public now at the level of enforcement, low-hanging fruits, meeting with what I call power centers everywhere. The power centers include youth leaders, church leaders, traditional rulers, owners of strong clubs and all of that. The representation begins, including market leaders and women groups. You migrate it like that. So you think of the short term and the long, medium and long term.
All right, Dr. Ikechukwu, thank you very much there for your recommendations. Let's return to the Lord Bishop of Usasa Diocese, Most Reverend Lamido. Most Reverend Lamido, let's have what would now be your closing thoughts on what can be done. It's most probably uncharitable to throw this in as the views expressed in some quarters that it isn't sufficient to say that we have a problem, in this case, an existential challenge of unlawful and frequent taking of life in our country, and just, the enthronement enemy, and you say, let us pray. Some would say that it goes beyond prayers. The churches or the places of worship as part of the agencies of socialization ought to do a lot more. What do you think should be done?
I'm actually not getting you very well.
What role should the places of worship play in the reorientation that is critical for us to get out of this lingering state of anarchy?
Thank you very much. The role of places of worship in trying to get the solution to this problem we are facing of lack of human value would be first that the religious clerics must be properly educated. Knowledge of their scripture is very crucial in this direction. And you can see that many clerics in recent times have come out propagating themselves, murder, and so on. I think there is lack of proper religious knowledge among the clerics. Then also you have lack of application of the scripture. Now, what religious bodies must do, sincere to the God they are serving and faithful to God, they themselves must fear God and teach the proper religion or faith, and not necessarily inciting our youths who are the leaders of tomorrow, but actually teaching them the proper word of God. And if you look at our screens today, various medias, you will discover that most people who are talking about the religion, church, mosques, and so on, are not really talking from the perspective of the knowledge of the religion, not even practice. So you could have a Christian, for example, who is not really
Oh dear, I wish you can conclude on that thought, but we do apologize to the Lord Bishop of Wusasa, and that will be it from his side. We do appreciate your contributions. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, that's how we conclude our conversation on this topic. It's a very serious one for us. Maybe we'll do a second take. I don't know. The director, the producers will tell us. But let me quickly appreciate our guests for today's program. Dr. Ikechukwu, Executive Director, Development Specs Academy. Thank you very much for your perspectives. Dr. Joseph Ochogo, Associate Research Professor and Director, Research and Policy Analysis, Institute for Peace and Conflict Resolution. Thank you. Professor Mohammed Kabiru Yusuf Hamdani, Director, Peace and Anti-Conflict Journalism Research Center at the Bayes University, Abuja, and of course, Chief Imam, Harmony Estate Mosque in Abuja. Thank you for your perspectives as well. All right, Kingsley.
All right, so that's it for us on Good Morning Nigeria for today. The program returns on Monday, same time, 7 in the morning. Enjoy your weekend. I'm Kingsley.
I'm Claire Adelabo Abdul Razak. Do have a great weekend, and remember to join us in our campaign against rape and rapists.